As Facebook and Twitter face criticism for how they moderated content during the 2020 election, many of President Trump's supporters are flocking to a different social media platform. It's called Parler. The company was founded in 2018 and brands itself as a, quote, unbiased social media. It has captured the attention of several allies of President Trump, including Senators Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, as well as the Trump campaign itself. Data shows Parler became one of the most downloaded apps on Apple and Android devices in the days following the election. For more, let's bring in CBSN tech reporter Dan Patterson. First off, Dan, Parler is considered an alternative social network. What does that mean? How does it differ from Facebook and Twitter? And what kind of content moderation policies exist?
Hey, good to see you. So when they say an alternative social network, they're really talking about their policies. There's nothing functionally or even technically different about Parler. In fact, Rebecca Mercer, who is a Republican donor and helped fund Parler, in her words, said one of the reasons they founded the site was to escape the ever-increasing tyranny and hubris of our tech overlords. That may be the case, but the site is built using Amazon Web Services for hosting. It relies on Google for a number of services, and Microsoft Exchange manages their email. So you really can't get any more big tech than Amazon, Google, or Microsoft. So what they do on the front end of the site, the pretty site that you visit and the app that you download, is front end code called CSS, but the back end of Parler is big tech. It's functionally and technically no different. So in other words, let me use punk rock as a metaphor. You can shave a mohawk, but if you have a trust fund, you're probably not punk rock.
I feel like that was directed at Rebecca Mercer. All right. Trump supporters have flocked to Parler in recent weeks, but its CEO has said that the company wasn't, quote, intended to be a pro-Trump thing. So what is it about the app that's really appealing to this group?
Well, look, Parler says that we are, air quotes, free speech. You can say and do what you want on the site. And until very recently, you could say and do almost anything on mainstream social media. What they really don't do, though, is use two different things that Twitter and Facebook do use, which is humans. Facebook hires a company called Cognizant and others, third-party fact checkers, human fact checkers. They also, and almost every big tech company, uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, to kind of automate the flagging of content at large scale. Parler doesn't have to do that because their scale isn't the same, and they say that they rely on their other users to fact check content on the site. We should say, though, that many of these technologies and many of these sites are really indistinguishable from one another in terms of the technology. It is, again, the policies of enforcement that really change what you may consider to be free speech. Again, the technology is usually the same.
Yeah, the self-moderation is interesting when you consider many of the high-profile names that have been flocking to Parler. Talk show host Alex Jones, the extremist group the Proud Boys, and Stop the Steal protest organizers have all been using Parler after being blocked on other platforms for spreading disinformation or calling for violence. Jones and Stop the Steal have voiced right-wing conspiracy theories. So is it really valid to think that this organization could self-police against this disinformation? And along those lines, some experts have voiced concerns that Parler could become even more extreme over time. Are those valid concerns, Dan?
Well, I think the concerns are valid. Look, I'm not an expert on what creates a radical or an extremist, but I do talk to experts, and often what they tell me is that, look, any closed loop system, whether it's a private group on Facebook where you're not interacting with an outside group, or even Twitter, where we have algorithms that kind of self-curate content, any closed-loop system is prone to favoring what we call confirmation bias. And we're probably familiar with this, right? We tend to watch programs that maybe affirm what we feel and believe. When you add algorithms and you add technology to that, it means that you can kind of just talk in a circle with the same people over and over and over. So when I speak, again, with radicalization experts at places like the Atlantic Council and other think tanks, they tell me that, hey, some of these recursive loops really can lend to radicalization, especially when you have the injection of third parties who are launching influence operations like we know that Russian GRU and IRA did in 2016 and again in 2020. And when you have domestic groups, it's not a partisan thing. It has nothing to do with your political persuasion or your personality type. All of us are prone to confirmation bias, and influence operations happen on both sides of the aisle. So it's really when we have these closed-loop systems that we have to be wary about hearing the same biased message over and over and the impact that might have on our behavior.
Yeah, our confirmation bias compounded with, of course, those algorithms that just continue to pump the information that it already thinks you want to hear back at you. So, Dan, looking into the future a little bit, could Parler cause a permanent shift away from Facebook and Twitter among users looking for these types of alternative facts? And then what is the impact on our increasingly fractured society if an entire segment of people are now getting their social media from one platform and other people are getting it from another, and people are just never having real conversations at all about policy differences or differences in perspectives?
Well, Lana, that's an incredibly important question that we're kind of all figuring out on a macro scale right now. But when it comes to Parler specifically, I don't think so. Look, Parler may become an incredibly influential force. It may have a really powerful niche group, but they're always going to be niche unless they do a few things. They have to hire incredibly talented developers and programmers. They have to innovate and they have to build new technology. Again, at the beginning of this segment, we started talking about Facebook and Twitter, Google, Amazon, Microsoft. Big tech is big for a reason. They're not just websites that we go to. These are web platforms. They build hosting sites. They operate in the cloud. They do email servers. All of this is the infrastructure. It's the guts. It's the roads that we drive on. It's not the pretty website that we visit. So in order for Parler to really be significant at a scale like Facebook or Twitter, they have to do those things that I enumerated, and they're just not doing that right now.
All right, Dan Patterson, thank you.